How long do you think that bipartisan unity will last?
I think it's going to last a long time, just like it lasted a long time after Pearl Harbor. And I believe that the American people will have every right to expect it to stay together. There may be discussion and debate about tactics. You know, at least all 100 senators are experts, and I'm one of them. But the fact is that we will be together, I think, for a long period of time. I just want to make one additional comment to what John Kerry said. There's, with rare exception, there's one common factor where these people breed and where they harbor, where they're harbored and where they base their activities, and that is a lack of any kind of economy and any kind of democratic institutions. So we, in the long run, you know, if we're really going to eradicate this problem, have to do whatever is necessary as well to try to make sure that these people in these countries have outlets, that they have growing economies, and that they have some installation of some kind of democratic institutions and ideals. That's not going to be easy, but in the long haul, that's going to be a very important factor.
All right, Senators John McCain and John Kerry, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, leads cleanup and recovery efforts for major disasters. I spoke earlier today with FEMA Director Joe Allbaugh and began by asking him about what he saw while touring the Pentagon yesterday.
Well, from the camera's point of view, it looks as if there's nothing taking place, but the fire department, firefighters, those brave men and women who putting their lives on the line are behind the exterior wall, shoring up so they can go in and recover the rest of the bodies. Governor Gilmer and I were on the first floor. We went back as far as C, possibly B ring, really inside.
So that's deep into the interior?
Deep inside, and inside the Pentagon. And amazingly enough, that was an area, I believe, that was just retrofitted. Otherwise, it would have been worse, quite frankly. But just steps away from bodies, you had individuals, victims who had lost their lives in this tragedy that have not yet been reclaimed. And it's heavy.
How long is that going to take?
Here in Northern Virginia at the Pentagon, it'll take weeks. They're moving expeditiously. In New York City, it is a tragedy beyond comprehension. You know, in excess of 600,000 tons of debris. It's a crime scene. And those brave men and women who are putting their lives at risk are paying proper respects, moving slowly because they're trying to recover as much information and as many people as they possibly can in a timely fashion.
So months before that's cleaned up?
It will be months, yes.
So how many?
I have no idea.
Last week, before all this happened, you met with a lot of New York City's finest.
I did.
Tell us about who we lost.
It's going to be tough, Tony. It will be tough, but I was at Rescue one of the station houses that respond to incidents such as that. Fine men and women on 42nd Street, I believe. I was sitting next to Chief Ray Downey on my left and Captain Terry Hatton on my right, and the rest of the men and women that were on the shift that day. And we had a great hour and a half together, and I learned about them. They learned a little bit about me. I was more interested in what they do day in and day out and how we can do a better job of saving lives. Today they're gone. And they represent the finest. This is going to take a long time for us all to get over. Yesterday we just started the first funeral services for those brave men, starting with the chaplain. It will take a long time. We're talking thousands of funerals. But I will say that if anyone can get through this, our country can get through this. It is amazing the resiliency that I've seen in our spirit, just making my way downtown with the mayor, with the governor on several visits to the pile, and people coming out of nowhere, lining the streets, offering words of encouragement, offering water. I saw a fellow yesterday offering boots, offering clothing to any of the volunteers who are at the site, working their hearts out, doing their best. It is absolutely amazing, and it's what makes America so great, quite frankly. And all of a sudden, our petty differences have fallen to the wayside, and we're pulling together as a country.
How can we honor them? What can we do to help?
First and foremost, I think the best thing that we can do is stay together as a country, showing proper respect, letting those differences fall by the wayside. There is a greater good. These folks did not die for nothing. They died for our country. They are our true American heroes. We will remember these people the rest of our lives. Our children, our grandchildren will know about this day. It has marked everyone, as it should. The president is doing a fabulous job. He is strong in his resolve. I have now been with him for over 8 years now, and I have never seen anything touch him as deeply as this incident, as it has the entire country. We all have a broken heart, and yet he's doing what he needs to be doing, making the tough decisions. And his visit the other day to New York City was just a tremendous morale booster. I believe on Friday, I forget which day this is, but I believe on Friday, to those people who were at the site. And he spent an inordinate amount of time downtown at every one of our stops. I think he was in with the victims for an hour and 20 minutes Friday evening before he departed. And it was extremely emotional. I'm so proud of the way he's responded to this. I am even prouder in the way that our country has responded.
Joe Allbaugh, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tony.
We turn now to the Middle East. Pakistan, once America's ally, lately has been friendly with its neighbor, Afghanistan, the home of Osama bin Laden. In recent days, however, the government of Pakistan has agreed to a list of requests from the American government. Those requests designed to isolate and pressure the Taliban, which rules over much of Afghanistan. Here with more from Islamabad, Pakistan, is Fox News correspondent Greg Palcott. Greg?
Tony, we're here in Islamabad, where we have a late word of an attempt to get alleged terror mastermind Osama bin Laden handed over to the United States. Sources confirmed to Fox News that a Pakistani delegation will meet with the Taliban in Afghanistan tomorrow and ask for his expulsion, or face the consequences. Osama bin Laden, President Bush calls him the prime suspect in Tuesday's terror attacks. He and his associates a growing focus of America's new war on terrorism. Bin Laden is believed to be in Afghanistan, protected by the ruling Taliban regime there. Neighboring Pakistan has supported the Taliban. It's now decided to support the U.S.
The present government has made up its mind. And the decision is that we are on the side of international community.
Pakistan's intelligence service has detailed knowledge of the terrorist camps thought to be operating inside Afghanistan, potential targets in any war, as well as movements of the terrorists themselves, including bin Laden.
If anybody outside the Taliban networks can know or can have the capacity to know where Osama bin Laden and his associates would be, I think that would be Pakistan.
If Afghanistan is the target of any military move by the U.S., Pakistan would be the ideal staging area. Experts here feel even if ground troops are involved with international backing for the mission, Pakistan should go along.
Pakistan will be a critical element in the success of any military operation inside Afghanistan.
Still, Pakistan's decision to go with the U.S. is not easy. A possible military action against a fellow Islamic nation could stir up serious unrest among militant religious groups in the country. Military strikes against Afghanistan could also push millions of refugees across borders into already overcrowded camps. And relations have not been perfect between the U.S. and Pakistan. It's now operating under American economic sanctions. The promise of an easing of its money problems and the political danger of not signing up apparently forcing Pakistan's hand. Pakistani President Musharraf has been selling his deal with the U.S. to religious and political leaders here all day. Another president trying to get his country ready for a potentially difficult time ahead. Tony.
Thanks, Greg. Now to the issue of intelligence. Why didn't we foil the bombing plot, and what should we do next? Here with answers, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, a Fox political analyst, and James Woolsey, former director of the CIA. Also with me, Fox News Sunday panelist Juan Williams. Mr. Speaker, let's go to the question of intelligence breakdown. It looks as if we had the information at hand and simply didn't use it. What do we do? How do we fix that?
Well, I think that you've got, first of all, I think you've got to give more resources to the intelligence community. I think you've got to repeal some of the rules that were imposed during the Clinton administration that, for example, blocked you from dealing with people who might have a human rights problem. By definition, if you're trying to penetrate terrorist cells, you're going to have to deal with people that wouldn't fit necessarily the ACLU standard. I also think that we probably need much better coordination, not just between the FBI and the CIA, but we have U.S. Department of Agriculture people at every entry port. We have Immigration Service people checking your passport. We have Customs people. We have Border Patrol. Their computers don't talk to each other. And we have a substantial problem. We recommended in a commission I served on, the Hart-Rudman Commission, creating a Homeland Security Agency and bringing Coast Guard and Border Patrol and Customs and Immigration into one place where they would actually have a central role and a central mission led by FEMA, because we warned that this incident, as terrible as it is smaller than the incidents that we warned about back in March, which we think in the next 10 or 15 years could include chemical and biological and nuclear weapons.
Mr. Woolsey, if you were still at CIA running that agency, what's the first thing you would do?
One of the first things would be to repeal the guidelines that were introduced in late '95 after I left, which Newt just referred to, which make it harder for us to recruit people who have violence in their background as spies. Another would be to go after some more resources. Actually, the CIA counterterrorism effort got a substantial amount of resources in 1999 because people were worried about Y2K. And they did, in fact, stop a number of terrorist incidents. They did a very good job along with the FBI. And then in our good American fashion, in the morning of January 1st, 2000, the budgeteers and the executive branch and the Congress sort of dusted off their hands and said, well, that problem is solved, and so they took them back to the lower level of funding. We need a sustained, substantial devotion of resources.
Do you think right now there is a threat of, let's say, a suitcase bomb in New York, biochemical kind of threat, germ warfare, again, because the CIA is not on guard and not sufficiently well funded?
Well, it's not because that part of the thing that would reduce the probability of that happening would be for the CIA to have more resources and broader authorities overseas. You may also want to look at the FBI's authorities in this country and make sure that without infringing the Constitution, we give them the authority that they need to do the job. We recommended changing both of those authorities on the Terrorism Commission that I served on last year and reported to the Congress, and I think both of those would help, but there's no certainty in this business. And the one of the weapons of mass destruction threats I'm most worried about is biological, because it could be as destructive as nuclear, but it's considerably easier to do. Happily, there's some aspects of it that are pretty complicated. That's why Aum Shinrikyo had difficulty with it, and they had to drop back, so to speak, into merely using nerve gas in Tokyo instead of the biological weapons that they were trying to develop.
Speaker Gingrich, you've also been privy to intelligence over the years. There's a lot of very generalized talk about states that sponsor terrorism, and you can look at the terrorist list. Let's be candid. Who are we talking about?
Well, this is public knowledge. This is not secret. We're talking about Afghanistan, Sudan, Iraq, Syria, and Iran as sort of the inner circle. I mean, those 5 countries have an unquestioned, continuing process of supporting state terrorism and supporting terrorists that have training. You can't have a training camp without a host government. Let me also say that the process of defeating terrorism, I think, has to mean as a minimum that these 5 states are required to kick out all the terrorist groups and to drop their support of terrorism. Period. I mean, otherwise this whole campaign has no meaning.
At this point, the United States is talking about possibly inviting Syria and Iran into a coalition. Do you really think they're going to fulfill the condition you've just outlined?
Actually, we have not approached Syria. Syria has approached us. And I think there's a very straightforward line here, and this is a very important line for the United States. If Syria is prepared to kick the 10 terrorist organizations headquartered in Damascus out of Syria, if Syria is prepared to help us and clean up Lebanon and kick out Hezbollah, then I think Syria should be part of the coalition. But to allow Syria or Iran to pretend to be part of the coalition while continuing to sustain terrorism, I think would actually make a mockery of the whole effort.
Now, Mr. Woolsey, as I understand it, Vice President Cheney has said that the President authorized that any commercial aircraft headed towards Washington, likely the one that crashed in Pennsylvania, could have been shot down by American interceptor military planes. What do we do about commercial flights in the United States, given what we saw take place this week?
It's a hugely difficult problem because, well, one thing we probably have to do is continue to leave the National Airport in Washington closed. But I think so. I think we ought to put high-speed rail into Baltimore and Dulles and let people use those two fine airports. I think this ends national airports use, as far as I'm concerned. But it's very difficult to give people the authority inside the United States on split-second decision-making to shoot down